Hey, everybody.
Good evening.
Good
Hi, Polly.
evening.
How are you?
Good. Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Polly Simpkins. Welcome. So psyched to be here to discuss Jeff Tweedy's World Within a Song. An awesome book. Um, so nice that you're here, especially on a steamy, kind of cozy summer night when you could be at the beach and out to dinner and all of those things. So thank you for making time. Um, Before we get started, I wanted to just mention our next book club. I'm going to be away for the month of September. So our next book club is going to be October 16th. And we're going to be reading The Music Never Stops by Peter Shapiro, which is a great book. I already interviewed him. If you don't know him, he owns the Capitol Theater. He took over Wetlands in New York when he was 24. And he now owns Brooklyn Bowl and got the Grateful Dead back together for the last time. So really interesting guy. And when I was reading the book, I'll just say that if you haven't read it, I started marking A's next to all of the words of advice because there's a lot of business advice and like just life advice. So I put together 101 words of wisdom from Peter Shapiro. And I shared it with him and he's given it to his kids since then. But it's helped me even in my life since I've read it. So The Music Never Stops. We'll post it on the website so you can learn more about Peter Shapiro and the book if you're interested in reading it. So if you're new here, thank you for coming. Typically the way it works is we share a little video at the beginning of the evening, and I share a few clips from my interview with Jeff Tweedy. I was really nervous. I was freaking out because I love him, but he was, of course, just lovely and kind. And thanks to my son Justin, who's helps me make these little videos where there's a little backstory about the book, a backstory about Jeff Tweedy. If you haven't read the book, it's totally fine. And just housekeeping stuff. If you want to keep your camera off, that's fine. If you want to chat and jump in, that's great too. There's no pressure. This is all about just learning a little bit about a book and being here together with MVY radio listeners. And that's always really fun. So, and then after that, we just kind of chat and hang out. So we'll be doing that as soon as the video ends. It's around 14 minutes. Get a drink, have something to eat, just relax, and we'll convene back after the video starts, after the video ends. And thank you for coming. You guys are amazing.
Jeff Tweedy is an American musician, singer-songwriter, author, and record producer, best known as lead vocalist, guitarist, and principal songwriter for the band Wilco. Jeff Scott Tweedy was born on August 25, 1967, in Belleville, Illinois, the fourth child of Bob and Joanne Tweedy. Jeff grew up with three siblings, older brothers Greg and Stephen, and sister Debbie. Jeff's mom bought him his first guitar when he was 6 years old. His musical influences came from the records his siblings left behind when they went off to college, including the Beatles' White Album and the Clash's London Calling. Jeff was 14 when he met Jay Farrar in English class at Belleville High, and together they would go on to create the band Uncle Tupelo in 1987. When the band broke up in 1994, Jeff formed Wilco with John Stearett, Max Johnston, and Ken Coomer. Jeff married Sue Miller, a former booking agent for the Chicago club Cubby Bear, on August 9, 1995, and they have two sons, Spencer and Sammy. During his career, Jeff Tweedy has released 22 studio albums, including 4 with Uncle Tupelo, 13 with Wilco, and 1 with Tweedy, a band he formed with his son Spencer. Also a solo acoustic album, 3 solo studio albums, and 2 collaborative albums. Jeff has received 2 Grammy Awards and has participated in a number of side groups, including Golden Smog and Loose Fur. In November 2018, Jeff published his first memoir entitled Let's Go, So We Can Get Back, a memoir of recording and discording with Wilco, etc. In 2020, Jeff published How to Write One Song, and in 2023 he published his newest musical memoir entitled World Within a Song, Music That Changed My Life, and Life That Changed My Music. Jeff Tweedy has captivated millions of fans with his honest and curious approach to his own life while expressing himself authentically through thought-provoking, powerful music, as well as writing books that welcome us into his world and inspire us along the way. I had a chance to sit down with Jeff on Zoom as he was just beginning his day in the Loft, Wilco's famed recording studio just north of Irving Park in Chicago. Here are a few clips from our conversation and an illustration of the thoughtful and intentional person that makes Jeff Tweedy beloved by so many.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for being here.
Hey,
We were
how are you
also
doing?
really good. We were also excited. We waited breathlessly for the book, talked about it a lot on the air. When September came around, people were writing in and talking to me from all over the country, in particular Chicago, sent me a bunch of wonderful books from book signings and stuff. So it's been really exciting. I was looking at your Substack, and Jill Schwartzman, sorry, she had such a beautiful quote, and she was talking about, it kind of summed it up when she read your book, how she was crying. She said, after I read it, because it brought back so many memories of who I was when I first heard the song, who I am now, and all the time that passed in between. And I love that she kind of captured it. She obviously loves you so much. And I wanted to start with a quote from You Are My Sunshine. And you said, how does a song become a home? The same way houses do. People have to live in them. Life has to happen inside of them. Laughing, crying, shouting. A song is home when it matters. Not at all who's singing, young or old. It's built for any voice. So there's so many beautiful quotes in the book, but I wanted to start with your mom, of course, Joanne, who's such a central character in your life, and going to Balancing Act by Volcano Sons. And I heard an audible quote from you, and you said, there's a difference to being heard and being listened to. And your mom was one of the first people who listened to you at the Formica table. I'm just wondering if you could just remember her a little bit, given that.
That's, I think, where most of our heart-to-heart conversations happened, if not all of them. And that's not uncommon, I think, for a lot of people, where the kitchen is like the kind of the main room of the house. My mom worked at that kitchen table. She would draw kitchens for her. She drove bathrooms and kitchens and designed them for a remodeling firm in our hometown. She taught herself drafting so that she could draw these kitchens. And so she would be up all night, and I was allowed to be a night owl myself because my mom didn't have many boundaries for her children, especially me, because I was 10 years younger than my other siblings. They always claimed that they had a much harder childhood because my parents were much more strict, which isn't uncommon also, but babies usually get away with everything in families. But yeah, my mom would drink Coca-Cola and smoke a cigarette and catch up with me and indulge me, almost anything that I wanted to talk about. And a lot of the things I was passionate about, I didn't feel like I had a lot of people to talk to about. Maybe I had friends that would share some things about them, but maybe not be able to reach the same level of intensity and their emotional connection to it. I don't know. It didn't feel. I felt like I was on a different wavelength, but my mom was receptive to that because I don't know why. I mean, she just was I was exalted. I was
Yeah.
exalted in her estimation. Yeah, it's like I could have written that specific chapter about a number of different songs that were probably played with the same intent, which is something really unique to songs. I think when you play a song for somebody that you didn't write, that you didn't record, it's not your product, it's not your, your creation, but you feel ownership over songs and feel vulnerable even sharing them with someone else as is something really truly revealing about who you are. And that chapter was meant to illustrate like how powerful that is.
Yes, I loved when you were talking about, and I think we all must know that feeling, at least I know I do, where you're playing a song for someone and you're so hoping that they get it and that they, and you talked about it, you had tears run. I mean, it was a beautiful chapter and tears running down your eye and just hoping that she heard the speakers and you were pointing them from the attic, I think.
Yeah.
And like
my bedroom was upstairs. Yeah. So I'd have to aim the speakers down the stairs into the kitchen.
Oh, so good. It actually, it kind of brings me to Death or Glory in the beret story, because I have to, full disclosure, my first interview with anyone was Henry Rollins in Des Moines, Iowa, in the middle of the night in the back of a car. And I'm sure you and I have shared a little time in the pit at some point, because it sounds like you have a real connection to punk and early punk days. But if you could recount the story, my favorite quote in the whole book was, "The city has the power to inoculate one against judgment." And I just think, and you said this story is kind of at the very core of who I am. So if you wouldn't mind, just what was New York like for the first time with your mom and the beret?
Well, I mean, I think you could go further, and I've heard it said many times that, travel, just being able to see the world tends to, create empathy and change people and maybe make more blunt their sharp assessments of other people and biases. And I think that was definitely the case coming from Belleville, Illinois, where on a slow weekday night you could lay down on Main Street and probably take a nap and not get run over or anything. It was, not a super small town, but very provincial and isolated feeling. To go from there to New York City and just be immersed in that amount of humanity and being really it was like something I was aware of because of music. I think I was aware of there being places like New York City. There's no way to imagine it probably accurately, but I knew there were people out there doing things and allowing themselves to be a lot different than the sort of stultifying normalcy of everybody kind of keeping themselves in check in a smaller community, which happens. So I went there with my mom to visit my brother. It was early 80s, and I don't think that I'm really grateful that it happened at that age. I wasn't able to maintain my commitment to join the ranks of people that had liberated themselves to be different, and I still don't feel like I've completely liberated myself to on an external sartorial level, but right. I did buy a beret there. Yeah, I did buy a beret because I saw people choosing to be who they wanted to be and inventing themselves, and it looked like a good strategy for living. Yeah, I got home and it wasn't something I was ready to own.
Right. I know that's hard at that age, especially.
Yeah, because I don't know if my connection to punk rock, I don't know if it was necessarily built on some sort of rebellion. I mean, it definitely had anger and feelings of rebelliousness towards society and you know, the system, whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that I was more on a human level than a governmental level. I felt betrayed, I think, by anti-intellectualism and this idea that you're not supposed to care and things like that. So there were things that were incongruous with even punk rock. There was a machismo to it that I did not respond to at all.
Right. And again, that also I think with punk rock, especially back then, was just that same theme of being heard and not feeling maybe like you're being heard and being able to express yourself. There's so much to it. But I love that story, and I love you saying, I asked her if she'd buy me beret, and she did, and seeing the street musicians in the subway and like that whole world that opens up. So
it was a good lesson. I mean, we really, everybody playing on the street in places like New York still to this day are, there's so many amazing musicians and people that are so gifted that it should humble you as a musician and definitely, open my eyes to the potential of, music and made me realize I needed to work a lot harder.
thanks to Jeff Tweedy for doing that interview, and thank you to PJ Finn for helping me get that going. And I wanted to say a huge thank you to Joe. I didn't say thank you before we started. If you're new here, I'm Polly Simpkins, and Joe Stickles is tech and so much more, and helps these Zooms run now for many sessions. So thank you, Joe. And thank you to everyone for being here. If you've joined while we were watching the video, thanks for being here. We just had a few clips from my interview with Jeff, and we're going to be posting the full interview audio as we do for each interview, as well as the video from tonight on our website. So you can find that video, the audio. He ended up talking about a bunch of different stuff, including his conversion to Judaism for his son, and Mavis Staples playing at his son's bar mitzvah. And there's just so much cool stuff on that interview. So make sure you listen in. But now we just kind of open it up, and wondering if you did get a chance to listen or read the book, what you thought. I'm also interested in hearing from anybody if you have songs that you'd like to share that were really formative for you in terms of your musical development. And lastly, when he talked about his musical influences and how he grew up listening to his siblings' records after they went to college, like what some of those might be for you. So anything and everything you want to chat about. I know it's always hard to go first.
All right, I'll go first, Paul.
Okay.
I'm not that nervous about it. One of the things I found reading the book is that everyone would think it's this tremendous obstacle to write a book about anything, let alone things you really care about. And the way he did it so simply with those really short chapters, and tells you it was almost like the outline of a book as you're reading it, or this first draft. And you realize that if you want to communicate something, sometimes you overthink it. And it's probably, as a songwriter, it's the same thing for him, is that you don't need to be as eloquent as you might think you need to be to make a point. And I enjoyed that. I love books with short chapters, but I thought it was well written, and it flowed along really fast. And it made it seem like a good idea. And for someone who's not a author by trade, really, I mean, I think he did a really good job, and it's a really good idea, I think, for someone else that might be challenged to try to write a story about something.
I so agree. I know, and I like how he called them re-memories. Like, so, there were little pieces in between the chapters that were re-memories and just remembering his life, and it makes you remember your own. At least for me, that's what it did. I'll share a song for me that it reminded me of, and this is such a departure, but is Captain and Tennille's "Love Will Keep Us Together." Do you remember that song? That's a song that would, like, if you were to write the similar book in your life, it's such an interesting question. Like, what songs would you put? And that was one of the first songs for me that just made me love music. I was like, wow, I was so little, and I remember thinking, that's amazing that you can express so much in a song that sounds so good. I always wonder what happened to them after. I know there's more people here than I can see because some people have their cameras off. So if you have your cameras off, feel free to jump in too. Oh, hi.
Hi. I have to say, I have to jump in because you mentioned Captain and Tennille. The first time I heard that song, I said, this group is going nowhere. No one's ever gonna like this song.
Really?
But I liked what Jeff said about the songs that we liked in our youth were not better. It was our hormones. Remember that part?
Yes.
So every generation thinks that the music that they grew up with was the best, and it unfortunately for us. But one song, I've been thinking about this book a lot, like songs that didn't make this list, and I could think about the Hollies, "Long Cool Woman in a Black Dress."
Wow. What a great song.
I always, it's kind of a happy, perky song.
Do you
Maybe
remember
everybody
hearing it?
has
Like,
a song.
do you remember how old you were when you heard that?
"Long Cool Woman in a Black Dress." Maybe in fifth grade, sixth grade. So whatever, when the radio world opens up to you. So funny, Captain and Tennille. Oh my God. Holly. It is sort of embarrassing. It's kind of hard sometimes to put out the songs that we loved, but I think we could go around the room and everybody could say a song that they wished.
I would love that.
That would be so fun. Maybe Jen could go next.
I'm happy to. I don't even know where to start. This is like trying to name your top movie or something for me. But if I think about back to my childhood, I was obsessed with Joni Mitchell and Carly Simon. Like obsessed. Narrowing it down to a single song though, that's tough. I'm gonna have to think on this one. I'll give you an answer by the end of the book club though.
Oh, I see Hillary has put her camera on. Maybe she has an idea.
Hi everyone, how's it
Hi,
going?
Hillary.
Hi. Yeah, I'm like trying to think. There's so many. That's what I love about this book is I actually haven't read it like from cover to end. I've sort of been picking sections, and you can do that with this book. You really don't have to read it in sequential order. It's a really nice, unique format so that you can just randomly. I just kind of like been randomly like picking a chapter, and if I'm feeling it, I keep going, or if not, I look around, and definitely has made me kind of think about those milestones in my life and like where I was and what was the song, like what was the song that marked. So for me, my first time going to New York City, also with a family member, with my sister, who's 7 years my senior, who was also the one that was instrumental in sort of broadening my musical horizon. So I'm a child of the 70s, so I obviously listened to like all the classic rock and southern rock and you know, Joni Mitchell and I can't even think, like all the classic things that were on the both the radio or just that my parents were listening to or collected. But my sister really opened my eyes to like the next wave of music, which was the punk rock scene and new wave. And even prior to that, like she brought me, I think it was the first trip I saw James Brown live, and like one of probably the last shows that he was still around live in New York City. And that, you know, the I Feel Good song is always like a favorite for me. So I always think of like that was kind of my first foray to the metro city experience where I hadn't, you know, we kind of grew up in I'm from the Southeast, East Coast, smaller towns, just totally different. And she's definitely more a city person. That also marked the moment for me where, similar to Jeff Tweedy, like I want to experience that and the feeling of it, and that was amazing. But I also immediately realized this is not my city. I will never live here. I like visiting here. I like to experience it, but I would never want to live here, like live my life. Whereas she is clearly very much that type of urban city center. So yeah, it's been cool to just kind of think back on those moments like in my adolescence or adult life, like milestones of what songs resonate with me for that. So yeah, there's lots more, too many.
Thank you so much, Hillary. I know you could talk about it all, and once we hear you, like listening to you talk, then it starts kind of generating so much. I feel the same. I went to New York, except I'm more like your sister. The first time I went to New York City, I was just like, someday I'm gonna live here. And um, just like Jeff, seeing the street musicians and seeing that it existed. And I love the story, as I mentioned to him, of his mom buying a beret, because we all know those moments in different ways where you're like, and Joe Strummer, he talks about and how he saw Joe Strummer wear the beret and like that was cool to him. So he wanted one too, but then he wasn't really ready to like really pull it off when he got home. It's one thing to think, you know, wear a beret like at home, but then to go to school and wear it, that's a whole nother thing. And I loved how vulnerable he was about that.
Hi, I have one. My cousin, when she went to college, gave me a box of her albums, and it ran the gamut from anything from Deep Purple to Melanie, Fleetwood Mac, so many, White Album, of course. And it really opens up your eyes when you listen to a complete random genre of music.
That is so
And
true.
who's the one that did Carolina, and then other people have done it, but it was the first one, I'm going to Carolina, or Carolina on My Mind, was it?
James Taylor?
Did he do, was that his original?
I think so. Polly, you probably know
I
best.
think so. I think, but you might be talking
James
about
Taylor, yeah.
There's Caroline, like I'm gone to Carolina, that one.
Yeah.
James Taylor.
Okay.
Yeah. But
Yes.
Carolina on My Mind might be a different song.
Right. But Melanie, I mean, I don't think she's with us anymore, but that goes way back. I mean, this box of albums had a lot of gems in it.
I love it. That's awesome. Yeah, and being the youngest. Oh, go ahead. Oh,
So
you have to unmute yourself.
can I give you my one negative part of this? Nobody else wants to be negative at all.
Oh, I
He was.
can't. Can
Can
you?
you can you hear me?
Yeah, we can't see you though.
Oh, I'll do off camera. There we go. Hello.
There you go. Hi.
So there's so many things that people are saying here. Like I was surprised how many things he was negative about. It really surprised me. It really that part let me down.
Mm,
That part like to me, so you're talking about old things and you can talk about like guilty pleasures or not. Like you talk about like my high school days would be Bon Jovi that he was
right.
negative. But and it is what it is, but it still has a special place in your heart. Um, and there's so many pieces that he picked out that I think are great that you think about. Like to me, his hip hop mention is like I was fascinated to hear. Like I went to the Chuck D thing last year when he was out here. I think it's fascinating to like that actually has an influence on people that are not in there. Like, but it was like, and Slick Rick is out here this year. Like there's all of that. There's the whole thing. Like there's so many things you could talk about there where like, does he really need to talk about the one Dolly Parton song he doesn't like? There's so much other stuff that he talks about that's so insightful. I found it almost disheartening, some of the stuff he was talking about.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know if you noticed, but like in the press, they got on him about that. Like a bunch of interviews, like just honed in on that.
Yeah,
You know,
and
I think it bothered other people too, but I understand.
and that's why I actually went and I listened to both of the Colbert and the um Myers interviews.
Yes.
'Cause I wanted to say, okay, how is it different when he talks about it versus how it appeared when he wrote it? It wasn't that different. It wasn't that different.
Yeah, did you find that he was kind of unapologetic? Like,
Yeah,
hey,
somewhat. It was more, I would say it was more he was awkward than unapologetic. And where I thought he was most interesting actually was when he went a little bit deeper in some of these things. And you really like to me the band in that last waltz, I think is a great movie. And you really like see and think and hear out of it. Like when he starts to touch into those, I think is when he's at his best. And he gives you these insights into that and where they are. Like or so when he talks about ABBA, I think about the Carpenters as like a guilty pleasure that I think is actually a great
right.
writer that you're embarrassed to say. But like that stuff is more interesting that you think about like you can be a rock and roller, but you're like, oh, but the Carpenters, is she just amazing? Like, but it's embarrassing to say that you would say it.
I know, it's so
Like that
embarrassing.
to me is the ABBA equivalent. But there's
Right,
like
right.
that's where he was, and that's where I think he was interesting when he talks.
It's such a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. And I was so interested to see him in interviews address it. And it even got to the point where I think Dolly Parton responded. And I mean,
Oh, really?
yeah, it could be a whole thing. Um, but yeah, it's a great, great point. Did anybody else have any comments about or criticisms about it? Thank you, Paul. What about you, Maggie? But yeah, I think
Uh,
that's a good point. Oh yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Holly, I'll just say I'm going to out myself as didn't read the book.
That's
So
fine.
I'm trying to piece together from your interview and from other people's comments exactly what the look and feel of it was. It sounds like smaller chunks, smaller vignettes all strung together. Are they temporally sequenced? Do they have us, do they tell the story of Jeff's life? Does it hang together or is it just a bunch of chunks? I don't, I'm not asking for positive or negative, but just some more description of what the book was really like.
Sure. Does anybody want to respond to that? I'm happy to do so. If anyone has any ideas, but yes, it's kind of a chronologically, he kind of goes through his life and he chooses a song for each kind of moment that was defining for him. And he does it really beautifully in very short chunks. And like you heard just a few where he was talking about, I think it was the Volcano Sun song and how he was trying to play it down the stairs with speakers so his mom could hear, and that need to play a song for somebody and want them to get it and want them to feel it like you feel it. And he was so unable to do that in his life that's how he and his mom was huge, and he mentions her a bunch in the book because he was kind of a loner and she spent a lot of time with him, and he really like that helped in his development in a large way. But yeah, so the book goes through, and I'm glad that you mentioned that you haven't read it because you don't need to be here, but there's 50 chapters and each chapter is a different song, and it kind of just, and it's like going through someone's life. It's a beautiful exploration of his life and how he became a musician, and like we all develop in different ways, and I think music's such a big part of that.
You're you're making when you say he plays the song and you need the other person to hear it and get it. I'm having a flashback to second year university, and it was the my roommate was his girlfriend was breaking up with him, And he was playing Don't Dream It's Over by Crowded House.
Well, there you go.
And really hoping that she got it. And it
Oh
didn't work,
my
but
God.
it was quite cringe before the word cringe meant anything to me then. It was very fun.
I love that he was using, and remember doing the like the cassettes, like the road, like the like making cassettes for people and doing a whole breakup one, like just to kind of, you know, get the word out, even though, but Don't Dream It's Over. That's an interesting choice for sure. And she didn't get it. Oh, that is too funny.
Chris, that just made me think, Chris or Christopher, I'm not sure. That just made me think of in college, I woke up one morning to, and in dorms, right? Like twin beds in a small dorm room, and the whole floor was awoken at like 8 a.m. My roommate, unbeknownst to me, had been dumped the night before and was blaring Chicago. Like all the sad songs. So, I mean, that's kind of the point of the book, though, right? Whether it's like a milestone or a memory that is tied to a song, or something makes you, a parallel memory makes you then think of the song that was playing. In my case, I will never hear Chicago again without thinking about that. Because even upon request, it would not be turned down. She was having a really bad day.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
I can hear the chorus. Oh, baby, please don't go. Yeah, yeah.
Oh
The whole
yeah.
album. It was like the Chicago
At
greatest.
11, it
Yeah.
turned to 11 at
It's
8
so
a.m.
loud.
after everyone's drunk. Yeah, that's good.
The one song that I can't unhear is In Germany Before the War. It was, if you had the Spotify playlist, if you listen along, it was a Randy Newman song, and it was so disturbing. I don't know if any of you listened to that as well. But I think it was definitely about a serial killer, and it was like, if you want to be incredibly depressed, go listen to that one.
And what do you relate it to? Like what were you like when you think of it?
Gosh, I was, well, the irony that he was saying that it came out on the same album as Short People. And yeah, like I said, it was just one of those things like you can never unhear it.
Totally.
Yeah. But when I read the book, it was almost like many of you were saying, it was like the story of my life, where it was like you go through your siblings' records or whatever, like he even talked about the Kraftwerk album that I found, and my brother, it was like the glow in the dark Kraftwerk album. But yeah, no, it was really neat to sort of see the similarities. It didn't bother me as much when he had a few songs that he didn't care for. I don't know. I feel like, I think we all have the song that we maybe overheard, or, for whatever reason, it was that song, like the Chicago playing too much, where it was like, nah, it doesn't do it for me. But yeah, didn't bother me as much.
Yeah, that's a good point. I loved, does anybody remember, and Chris, since you didn't read it, Michelle shocked the song Alaska, and he told the story about a girl that he was really good friends with when he was young, and she was a tomboy, and they used to ride bikes together and hang out when they were quite young, and they were really close. And I loved how he talked about how like eventually it got like kind of uncool that he was hanging out with a girl, and they both started to feel self-conscious about it. And that song was really important to him during that time. And years later, at a Wilco show, I think it was, she came and she showed up. And there's more to the story, but like, I mean, the fact that songs carry stories for us like that is just, I think, is what he does so beautifully in this book and articulates so well.
That was my favorite part of the whole book. I'm a little bit, I spent a lot of time thinking about life, and I kind of picture it as everybody's on this path, and sometimes your paths come together and they stay together for a really long time, and sometimes they're together, they part really quickly, right? And I have so many people in my life that our paths have parted, and Facebook and social media made this funny, right? You feel like you still are attached to people even though you're really not. And I think we all do this, whether we're conscious of it or not. So much of who we are is built off of what we took from other people. And I, for one, think about those other people a lot and what they contributed to me and to my life. And I thought that that story articulated that so beautifully, that they still cared for each other so deeply. They thought about each other all the time. They kind of assumed the other had forgotten about each other, at least he had. And to have her come and show up and embrace him and deliver such a beautiful message, it just goes to show that you really do stick with people and you can carry love for them even if you're not really in each other's lives anymore. And I really love that part.
That's beautiful.
I thought it was a
Thank
great
you,
story.
Jen. It's so true.
I also really loved the Anchorage chapter where he said that if anyone could capture the that every time he hears that he gets teary-eyed because it reminds him of how he was reunited with that long lost tomboy friend, and that when they saw each other, they just both knew that it was awesome and everything was cool and okay all these years later. I really liked that chapter as well. The other thing that I liked about this book in general was the size of it. It was so cute. When I picked it up at the library, I was like, this is the cutest book.
It's so cute.
Yeah. And then the chapters were short and easy to read. So it wasn't, it wasn't a slog to get through at all. You could just pick it up and continue. And as far as those songs that like bring you back to your childhood, mine would be like Jim Croce on the 8-track or some old Paul Simon 8-tracks, being in the car with my parents back then. And yeah, it just takes you back. It's amazing how music can do that. It takes you back to a time and a place, and it's awesome. That's what's wonderful about music. And yeah, he showed that in a lot of different ways, both positive and negative. And sure, he had his opinions about things, but don't we all? So I thought it was a great read and a good choice, Polly. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I thought it would be a good beach, like summer read. Just throw it in your bag. But yeah, what a lovely way to just kind of share what music means to him, and then thinking about his career and the music that he's created out of thin air. And I love the subtitle, Music That Changed My Life and Life That Changed My Music. It's just the perfect kind of summation.
I've been churning on the idea that because I'm 8 years, I'm the baby, and I have brothers older, starting with 8 years older. And so I think just through mere inattention, they let me hang around. but but I wondered, and I'm still working on it. Of course, I didn't have my own musical tastes as this little kid running around, but I absorbed theirs through osmosis and thought, yeah, this is what good music is. I'm wondering when I then used that raw material and started to form my own tastes and what. And I'm embarrassed to say the first song I ever bought with my own money was Popcorn by Hot Butter. So, it's the
Awesome.
stupidest little electronic ditty, but that's like I'm like, oh no, I should have maybe done a better job before generating my own taste.
Oh, I love that. That reminds me of the Susan Rogers book, which everything always comes back to that book, which is one of the books we read. I'm not sure if you were here for that, Chris, but just that reminder that we all have our own musical language, and depending on even our own brain chemistry. So yeah, it's a wonderful thing to ponder. Oh, there she goes.
There we go.
Hi.
Sorry, I've halfway been driving and now I'm in a place where I can actually get on the camera. But I love the book. Of course, I'm a little biased. I am a Chicagoan, for those of you that don't know that, which is probably all of you. But what I love about Jeff Tweedy is he is consistently authentic and approachable. And, he portrayed that in this book as well as his others. And I just feel like it's sort of rare for someone to be of his stature to be so open and consistently authentic. And of course, sometimes we see him around town in Chicago, and he's just exactly as he appears to be. And I could relate to so many chapters in that book, of course, like the rest of you.
I know, and I know you are our Chicago connection, and it's good to hear about him in Chicago, and I know you love him, and I love that, you know, you have that same, because you see him probably, or he's out and about, and he does those wonderful shows that are, I think, are they like request shows where you can, how does that work?
Yeah. So with the release of this book, he did a show at a small venue, small local venue. And what he did was he took requests from the audience for songs and then asked the person to come up to the mic and tell the rest of us in the audience what that song meant to them. So I can't imagine what it feels to be Jeff and be sitting there on the stage and having this full circle moment, you know, as he talked about in the book, what the songs meant to him. And now he's sitting there listening to other folks about his own music and just how wonderful. It was very, very moving, I have to say, because, you know, people had some pretty incredible stories, and the songs they chose of Jeff's that spoke to them just was very moving. It was really wonderful.
I mean, I think that says it all with him, you know, just the fact that he would do that and take the time and
yeah. So I thank you so much for choosing this book for the book club. It was a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Thanks for being here for it. It's awesome, and it's just so fun to see you all and just to be together, and you know, and to remember that thread of music, how it affects all of us. So
yes, thank you.
Thanks, Erin.
I kind of want to share, I think for me, like when Jeff was talking about those rememories, like one of the first ones I read was about the I don't know if was it a science experiment to make this it's with the Boy Scouts or Cubs or something.
Oh, right.
That experience, I just love that, like, coming of age moment. We've all had those throughout our life, and how he, you know, was pretty, he didn't really say anything more, but he just like acknowledged it. He comes from a place of humility always. Like, I love his nature, and I can see why Bob Dylan is one of his most favorite songwriters and musicians. They both have that way about them. And for me, like, I guess if I had to choose someone of today or more my generation, like Amy Mann is one of my favorite songwriters and musicians. She carries that for me too. In her, just her choices of music itself, like her choice of instrument and music, but also in her lyrics. But yeah, I just love that the way he told the story, and I wanted to know more. I wanted to know, like, well, what's it like with your dad now? Like, has it crossed over into something else, or is it like, you know, he was already too in his ways to change at all? Like, is it different now that he's a grandfather? Like, I would be interested to like know more. It made me want to learn more about that part of, because his mother was so instrumental in rearing him in that way. And even though his dad maybe wasn't as voluntarily, like, really involved with him, he, you know, he also played a role in shaping him and who he is. And so, yeah, I just found that really special for us to be able to even learn that about somebody. It's a very personal, probably something that took years for him to even be able to process and to communicate, you know, to really get that on paper. Like, that says a lot for him. So yeah, that was one of my favorites too. So yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's so fun to hear everybody's thoughts about it.
I also liked what he had to say about the 10cc song, I'm Not in Love, how that growing up, he totally hated it and he couldn't stand it and he thought it was the worst thing in the world. And then as he got older, looking back on it, let me see, I just had my glasses on so I could find the quote.
I
He
was trying
said,
to find it too.
he said, that doesn't change the fact that this song over time went from Brussels sprouts to cake in my ears, taste buds somehow. Yes. So, and it just goes to prove that our tastes do change about music over time, like something that we may have hated at one point or that we associated with something that was a horrible time in our life. Like you get to a certain point and your tastes have changed and you're just like, man, yeah, that's actually really good. I liked that chapter that way.
I love that too. Thank you for bringing that up. I had forgotten about that, and it's so true. And I think he does this beautiful, showing the trajectory of his life. He does a beautiful job at that exact thing. Yeah, thank you. That is a great song. How about you, Nick?
Oh, I particularly like the sort of shaggy dog elements of some of the chapters. One that stuck in my mind because the song we're about Tweety and I are about the same age. So it came out, we were about the same age, is the chapter about My Sharona and the drive-through.
Totally.
Yeah. Not only that he admits he kind of liked the song, because in retrospect, the knack kind of turned out to be a bunch of misogynist pigs. But not understanding what all the panting was until much later. So it's like that one just made me roll. But there's so many great stories here. Somebody earlier mentioned the band.
Yes.
So the Maid's version of The Wait, something that stood out, and the Randy Newman song stood out. And shout out for the Tennessee Sea song, which we saw in a TV show a few years ago.
in Halifax.
And it was just one of those things that was always sort of in the background.
Yeah.
So I downloaded it and read up on how it was made. It's really complex piece of music, with layers upon layers of harmony vocals, and just kind of it has an impressive backstory. But My Sharona takes the cake.
Gosh, that song was so hot. Remember? It was just like everywhere.
In retrospect, I had no idea what it was about. I was a kid. I just remember like really liking like the beat, and it was like, like your first grade school dance. It's like, we can dance to this. This is great. And nobody had any idea what it was about.
That's awesome. Thank you both, and thanks for coming.
Thank you, as always, for hosting us. I think we can say.
It's an honor. We have about 5 minutes left if anybody has anything else they want to mention. Susan, how about you? You don't have to if you don't want to.
No, well, I'm another one who didn't read the book because I'm so involved with other books and book clubs. There's just no time.
It's hard.
And so I don't know if I'm homing in right, but back to a point in time. I mean, I saw Elvis Presley on the Dorsey Brothers show on a black and white television.
Wow.
And that was the Everly Brothers. And then when I got to college, I had a roommate who introduced me to Bob Dylan. And in the town where I live in Connecticut, there is a very small ski area, and the headliner was Joan Baez, and she introduced him. He was not the headliner that night. So, I don't know if this is in rhythm and rhyme with everything you've been talking about, but those are some of the memories for me.
That's a defining moment to see that. And I'm wondering if you guys have seen the trailer just came out for the Dylan biopic. The one with Timothy Chalamet. They've been filming it, and it just all of a sudden they have a trailer for it. So that'll be interesting to see if it's good. But yeah, to see Dylan, oh my gosh, do you remember what he's saying?
No, he sang with her. It's just way too long ago and too many beers.
Yeah. Wow. That's a whole
But
nother
as I
conversation.
said, the point was she was the headliner.
Right.
And she introduced him. And yes, so whatever his early songs were from Freewheeling would have been,
Right.
what was ever presented that night.
Incredible.
Crazy. Yeah.
That's another great conversation. First concerts or concerts that have defined your life. There's so many good ones. So much good music out there now, too. Anybody else? There's a lot of people with their cameras off, and I want to say thank you to you, too, for being here. And it's always good to just have people. And even if you don't say anything or you don't feel comfortable, it's all good. Like just knowing you're here is really nice. So thanks for showing up.
I don't know if you mentioned it. Oh, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I don't know. I haven't read all of the book either. I've just, as I was saying earlier, I've been kind of picking chapters and just kind of diving in. But Chrissie Hynde and the Pretenders is also another one of my favorite artists that I came into music with and grew into. But interestingly, like kind of a similar look, different music, different vibe. But I remember one of the first records that I bought was a little 45, and it was Joan Jett. So I went from Joan Jett and like, maybe I was in junior high or younger. And then later, like in high school and college, Chrissie Hynde and the Pretenders. I don't know if he mentions either of them in the book yet, but if you want to give me a spoiler alert, you can.
I don't remember if he did. I don't think he did, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that it helped form your, that's like kind of the whole point of the book is just like how you're informed about music. And even like for me, Captain and Tennille is one of the first songs, but that informed just my love. And then you move on and then other things catch you and then you're like pulled along. So it sounds like the same with you. And I heard the Pretenders they're out on tour. I don't even know if it's like, I know it's Chrissie Hynde out in front, but I don't know if I know that they were recently in Massachusetts performing. Everybody has said they're great. So
Yeah, I'm bummed I missed. I have seen them before, but I didn't even realize they were so close. I would have probably tried to go, but yeah.
Yeah, it is the Pretenders. Yeah, it's great.
Is it the original? Because
yes,
for a while she was doing albums just by herself with some other musicians, and like that album alone was just really just her. So I wasn't sure what was going on with them. So that's good to know.
It seems like there's a band of artists that it's like 80s, 90s that now they're not confident they'll draw enough for a whole show. So they're like teaming up.
Yeah.
Chicago and Earth, Wind and Fire were just here. And
I
so
saw that.
similar, like get a few Joan Jett and then I guess they trot them out for 45 minutes and then I don't know if the the Geritol wears off and they
Right. Yeah, I have seen they've been doing that. It makes sense and sounds amazing. I mean, so many of them. Yes, thank you all for coming. 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. And it always goes by so quickly. But again, thank you all for showing up on a summer Wednesday night. It means so much to me. Thank you for being part of MVY Radio, for listening, for caring about the station, and for being part of it. And if you weren't here at the beginning, our next book is going to be The Music Never Stops by Peter Shapiro, who's a fascinating person. And that's going to be October 16th. So hope to see you then. Can't thank you enough. If you want to be on the mailing list, I think we have lots of your emails, but if not, please leave it for us. And thanks for being here.
Thank you, Polly.
Thanks,
Thank you, Polly.
Thanks again,
Polly.
Daniel Stickle.
Good night, everyone. Yeah.
Have a good one.